Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 10th of March 2026. Please be advised, everyone present, that this is a public meeting and it's being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. We will start with declarations of interest. Appear to be none. Apologies for absence and substitutes, which there are quite a few.
Yes, Chair. There's apologies from Councillor Karimi Van Loo, Councillor Youssefian, Councillor Merrill and Councillor Goodman, and substitutes Councillor Alba and Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. I'll use this one. That's all right. We can use one or the other just as well. Yeah, that's there's good reasons for those absences. I know we've tried to get substitutes in place, but there's we'll disclose that outside of the public meeting if anyone's interested to know. It's not a secret, but there's very good reasons for those. Minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 3rd of February. Any comments to be made on them? I don't remember when there's been such a large gap between Overview and Scrutiny Committee meetings in the last few years. I mean, feels like an age ago.
It's been a week.
If we can remember, I remember back that far, but it looks like it was pretty much an accurate record as far as I'm concerned. No one seems to be raising any objections or concerns, so we'll accept them as a fair and accurate record. Chairman's announcements, I have none. So we'll move on to public speaking.
There's no public speaking, Chair.
Then we'll move straight on to the Cabinet reports and the plans for accelerating the Council's net zero target. And Annie, come forward and speak on that. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I think you've probably all met me before, but my name's Annie Samazi and I'm the Clean Growth and Sustainability Manager. And this is my colleague Neve, who'll just introduce herself briefly.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Neve Carpenter and I am an Environmental Coordinator for Broadland District Council.
So the report today sets out proposals to accelerate the Council's organisational net zero target from 2030 to 2028. It provides the context for this change and outlines the key actions and the next steps required to meet this revised ambition. The report is also supported by Appendix 1, which is the decarbonisation pathway, which details the actions that are required in order to meet this accelerated target. The recommendation within the report is that Cabinet recommends that Council approves the acceleration of the organisational net zero target from 2030 to 2028, supported by evidence set out in the most recent carbon footprint report, and that this revised target is then reflected in updates to the Climate Change, Environment and Biodiversity Delivery Plan. So in terms of background, Broadland District Council has a long-standing commitment to environmental sustainability, with environmental considerations which have been embedded into decision-making process for many years. So since the 2018-2019 financial year, the Council has been calculating and then publishing its carbon emissions annually. In 2022, as many of you will remember, the Council then strengthened its commitment by formally adopting a net zero target for 2030, and this covered all three scopes. This was then reinforced in 2023 when the Council declared a climate change and biodiversity emergency. So the Council continues to monitor and manage its emissions through annual carbon reporting in line with the greenhouse gas protocol, which is supported also by the Council's delivery plans, which guide our decarbonisation activities across the whole of the organisation. So that is a corporate-wide delivery plan. At the beginning of 2025, Groundwork East were commissioned to undertake an independent audit of the Council's carbon reporting methodology, and they confirmed that the approach that we do use is in line with the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and recognised best practice, but it did then recommend some methodological improvements. So these recommendations have been implemented and applied retrospectively to previous reporting years. And so one of the most notable changes from that recommendation was to include well to tank emissions, which we do now include in all of our carbon reporting. So since the baseline year, so that 2018-2019 year, the Council has achieved significant reductions in its emissions. So overall, it has reduced its emissions by 1,161 tonnes of CO2 equivalent, and that represents a 77% reduction in our Scope 1 and 2 emissions, and then a 72% reduction in our Scope 3 emissions. So turning to the Council's current position, the total carbon footprint now stands at 425 tonnes of CO2 equivalent per annum. So this is the lowest carbon footprint of any local authority in Norfolk, and it remains the lowest even when we've added that well-to-tank emissions onto our footprint, which actually now accounts for about 65% of our overall footprint, so it's a significant amount. So given this strong progress, it is now feasible to bring our net zero target forward from 2030 to 2028. And accelerating this target will ensure that the environmental commitment is achieved ahead of planned local government reorganisation, which creates a strong environmental legacy for Broadland District Council. So in terms of cost and resource, the accelerated target can primarily be delivered through the existing Environmental Project Reserve, which was originally established to support the actions in the climate change environment and delivery plans, and now also within the proposed actions as outlined within the decarbonisation pathway. There is currently around £395,000 remaining within the Environmental Reserve, and this funding would be used to support the remaining decarbonisation actions that are required to meet that 2028 target, and the existing delegations allocated to that funding would be used so that relevant projects are progressed in line with the current governance. So I will pause there. I realise that was a bit long-winded, and take any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Ellen is very first to ask.
Yes, thank you. I've just got some comments to make and then some questions. So I'm really pleased to see this come forward, and thank you for all the work that's been done on it. It's good to see that an independent audit has confirmed that we followed the protocol appropriately, and that we've recommended some additional recommendations. I'm really pleased to see that well-to-tank emissions now reported. I was quite interested to see that they account for 65% of our emissions, which seems really high. I mean, I was quite surprised by that. But I think the council's done incredibly well. It's really good to see a 72% reduction in Scope 3 emissions, which is actually quite hard to achieve, because obviously the council's got far less direct control over these. And it's really good to see the robust approach to carbon offsetting. So it's a really good report. I thought it was visually interesting and very readable as well. So that's great. One of my questions is, can we cut transport emissions any more? For example, could we change from diesel-powered council-owned vans to electric? Just looking at those to start with.
Yeah, so thank you very much. And in terms of the council-owned vehicles that are most frequently used for visiting communities and residents across the district, those are already, the vehicle is already transitioned to electric vehicle. That's very recent, within the last month or so. So yes, so we do anticipate a reduction in emissions from council-owned vehicles. Yes.
That's really good to hear. Thank you. A second question is, what is being done and or will be done to ensure that all of the One team are aware of what's happening with council decarbonisation and the importance of it?
Yeah, so in terms of, because as you point out, this is a corporate-wide agenda, and not just one that sits with the climate change environment team. So Niamh and Kirsty Jessup, who isn't here this evening but has also worked on our carbon footprinting, is planning to meet with all of the assistant directors and senior managers to kind of go through elements of this work, or wider things that we're doing as a team around the environmental agenda, just to ensure that that's then being cascaded down across the council. So that's kind of one of the ways that we would be doing this. because, as you say, it's important that this is corporate wide. So yeah, we're planning those in the next few. Well, I don't know. Neve's doing it next month.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, that's really good to hear. And just one really minor point. On page 4 of the report, I think it should say managed instead of manage for Broadland Country Park. And just another point that I think it might be useful to have page numbering on the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Fran?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to, I was going to ask about the vehicles, but obviously you're saying Handy Person Plus has gone over already, which is fantastic. But I also wanted to ask you about the trialling of the electric refuse vehicles. Where are we with that? Because I know previously when we looked at it, the vehicles were, well, ridiculously expensive, frankly. And obviously the range was nowhere near what we were looking for. So I just wondered if you could tell us where we are on that journey, because obviously that will make a big difference if we can go even from HVO, which has obviously made a huge difference. But also around the, we talked about decarbonising temporary accommodation, and obviously, well, all of our estate really, we've started doing that, obviously we've done it here. But with the temporary accommodation, is there any help that we can get from the Warm Homes Fund? Are we using that as well alongside the money you've got, the 395 grand? So that's it. Thank you.
So I'll pick up on those 2 points. So around HVO fuels, obviously they have contributed significantly to our emissions reduction, but the long-term aim would be to look at something that is even more sustainable. Electrification, and obviously there's been work in the past that's looked at other options as well around green hydrogen. As you pointed out, historically there was a trial of an electric refuse collection vehicle and it struggled with the ranges. We would like to trial it again because obviously HVO fuels is an interim solution. It's not the long-term, it isn't the long-term solution. I suspect the ranges haven't massively increased, but I think that it's really important that we still do that work to understand what does that long-term journey look like in terms of transitioning that fleet. We've obviously got a much better future-proof depot now at Frettenham, and you know, there's cabling and infrastructure in there to allow for electrification as and when it's feasible. But ultimately, we have a service to deliver in terms of collecting waste. We need to ensure that when that transition is made, that it's also compatible with ensuring that we have clean streets, that collections are viable. We continue to talk about hydrogen. Again, it's a long way off being financially viable. So that work is still going on, but it's challenging when you have a rural district with such long ranges on the vehicles. And then in terms of the temporary accommodation, I'm actually going to just slightly glance over at my colleague Nicola, who I believe, my understanding is that the Warm Homes funding isn't eligible for our temporary, but I'll just hand over to Nicola if that's okay, Chair. Thank you.
That's correct. Warm Homes local grant funding isn't able to be used for council-owned accommodation because there was a separate funding round for that.
That's correct at this stage. We had also looked at other funding, things like there's the Public Sector Decarbonisation Social Housing Fund, which rolls off the tongue. But the council isn't eligible for that because we don't have enough stock. So in some ways we fall in some gaps in terms of that funding. So at this stage, the proposal is that we would allocate the Environmental Project Reserve to support with that decarbonisation.
Jonathan.
Yeah, obviously looking at from 1819, obviously the move to this building and the change in the waste fleet were the two major impacts on to knock the target rate down. Obviously the Handyman Plus vehicles and everything, but there's only a couple of them, isn't there? So I'm just, where else can we have a big win, if you know what I mean? What would we be looking at? Have we got things like Carabrick, because has that got panels now? So I'm just looking at, you know, obviously to get the big wins. Are there any more big wins, or is it all? Have we achieved quite a lot of that already?
So a lot of the big wins, as you point out, have been made, and what I would say is that once you've made those big emissions reductions, the stuff that's left behind gets more and more difficult to decarbonise. So we often refer to it as sticky emissions, or emissions that are hard to abate. But notwithstanding that, there are still some areas. So as Councillor Wymark's pointed out, we have got our temporary housing accommodation. They don't emit an enormous amount of emissions. So doing that carbon reduction work doesn't necessarily save a huge amount of emissions. What it does do is create homes that are better insulated, that are not reliant on oil and gas. And, you know, obviously there's lots of issues around the volatility of oil and gas prices. So it delivers some additional benefits, but certainly the kind of the more that you start to it's not even a word, abate those remaining emissions, the more challenges that you see in terms of making those big gains.
Can I just ask, the work being done for the temporary accommodation, presumably the nature of it being a very temporary accommodation is that we are really footing the bills for the energy in those places while those people are in. So although we're bringing that forward as something to do, it should actually provide us with some savings as well in terms of energy bills and, you know, just in general, and also perhaps as an asset, improving the value of that asset.
So probably my answer would be yes and no. So I would say that it certainly improves the value of that asset by virtue of the fact that we wouldn't remove new or quite up-to-date boilers. So we've been looking at properties where we've already got heating systems that are out of date, and therefore you would remove them and then replace them with air source heat pumps. So by virtue of doing that, you've improved that asset. By putting in a new heating system, you've improved the insulation. In terms of running costs, electricity has got a higher unit cost than gas. So what we would probably be trying to do is achieve cost neutrality on those properties, and I think that's an important thing and a challenge for us. So we would be looking at trying to complement a heat pump with insulation and with things like solar. So you're looking at a whole building approach and not just being like, oh, we're just going to focus on the thing that consumes carbon. You'd be looking at, well, actually, how do we improve and make that building more efficient in terms of its fabric, and then looking at things like solar as well. So it doesn't necessarily achieve a cost saving in terms of bills. What we'd be looking for is cost neutrality, but it certainly improves the value of the asset just by virtue of the fact that you're updating it.
I think, yeah, what I was looking at was that you can spend money to save the output of carbon, but you don't get anything necessarily back for that other than isn't it good we're putting out less carbon, but if we're spending some money and it's cost neutral, then it's win-win because we're saving some carbon and it's not costing us anything. So I think that's a win-win in that general sense. Also, you mentioned the 395,000. You're happy that this is the net zero is net zero new costs. You just think it's basically we're doing as much as we can. We're in a position to do this now. We can do it. It's not going to cost us any more money. Again, it's a sort of cost neutral in terms of what the council's been asked to find for the future.
So the activities that are outlined within the decarbonisation pathfinder, in terms of the temporary accommodation, we've had those properties surveyed and we've got some indicative costs. They are still indicative at this stage. The other options we've also looked at and got costed or a sense of what those costs are, and we're comfortable that at this stage they can be accommodated within that existing budget.
Fabulous. Anybody else got anything they'd like to say? Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on the Food Innovation Centre and how we're going to try and make that net zero?
I might over to my colleague if that's okay. My understanding is that building has already was delivered to BREEAM excellent standards, so it's already a highly energy efficient building. But I think there's a few things around the way that the building is operated that restrict some of our opportunities around renewable energy tariffs. But I'm going to pass over to my colleague George Denton if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. As Annie's already said, the building's designed to BREEAM excellent standard, which in itself is a good start. There are some practical complexities about how the electricity is delivered to the Food Enterprise Park, in that there wasn't sufficient provision, and arrangements have been made to draw down directly from the pylons. That means the commercial contract around provision of electricity is more complicated than you would otherwise see. Practically, for us, it's about establishing whether that commercial arrangement is in effect net zero, in that the tariff is a green tariff as we would want to see it. Because of the complexity of that arrangement, we've not been able to determine that that is the case. So for us, it's about continuing that negotiation relationship with the Food Enterprise Park to seek the certainty that we're looking for in that green tariff. But ostensibly, the electricity it's about that tariff and the commercial arrangement, which we can't really go into today.
I can't believe the Food Innovation Centre has been brought up here without the Vice Chairman being here, because it's one of his favourite topics, so he'll be gutted. Thank you. Has anybody else got anything they'd like to add before we move to the vote? No? Let's move to the vote on this. You can see the recommendation as stated there. All those in favour?
And that's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed for your report and the positive news around the costings. Let's go to the adoption of the implementation of the Greater Norwich Green Infrastructure Strategy Supplementary Planning Document. Just rolls off the tongue. Adam.
I think, as I may have joked before, I don't think the government has made any proposals to shorten the length of planning documents. This document will be very familiar to you because under the Constitution we bring supplementary planning documents through committee to go out to consultation, and then we're now bringing them back seeking formal approval. So just to recap, the Greater Norwich Green Infrastructure Strategy was a sub-regional project which was led by the Greater Norwich Growth Board, which is the team that deals with CIL income and expenditure. It was conducted by Chris Blanford Associates. It was signed off by leaders last March, and some of you may have attended a launch event at the Sainsbury's Centre at UEA last May. This report doesn't seek to change any of that. All it wants to do is to convert that strategy document into a supplementary planning document so it can be used by our planning officers when determining planning application. The actual piece of work that makes this as an SPD is actually very short, and it's found at Appendix A, Section 2, and is simply titled The Purpose of the SPD. As a planning department, we want to use the Green Infrastructure Strategy and for developers to understand how their site sits within that wider green infrastructure network around their proposal. Then at the site level, we want them to look at their layout designs and to think about how they could facilitate good access to green space and how they can use the landscape features and drainage features of their site and the land around it to improve ecological quality. Section 3 of the Cabinet Report explains how the consultation took place between November and December for 6 weeks. So the development industry have had clear sight of this document. The main changes arising from the consultation were just to explain in a little bit more detail how case officers would review development proposals against the SPD, looking at how sites sat within green infrastructure corridors and how the details of their proposal would fit with the overall aims of the strategy. So the consultation process has helped tighten up a few minor points. It's now ready for adoption and then could be used in determining planning applications. This is actually one of the last pieces of work you'll be seeing under the 2024 Greater Norwich Local Plan, because the government is introducing a new planning system, and as part of that, from the 30th of June, we'd be no longer able to adopt supplementary planning documents. So we're very much looking to get this piece of work completed. Just to note the recommendation, there's a mistake in there. It's actually the planning portfolio holder for planning that we should have referred to there.
Thank you. Does anybody would like to ask what? I think this has come round. It's been round, hasn't it? Various different forms and things. Can I just ask? All I would just say is, I mean, you say that we know under the government changes from June, we cannot adopt any further changes to planning guidance for the council. Whatever. So, how long a gap? Obviously, there's that they've got a cut off in June. The government are changing the rules. Is there going to be like a hiatus of a year, 18 months, 2 years, or something before something new comes in? Does it mean that councils who don't adopt these things are absolutely, just as a statement of sort of out of interest, really, to know? I just wonder if there's people going to be left in limbo.
So, I think it's around 30% of councils across the country have got an up-to-date local plan. So we're in a strong position relative to many, and part of the government's proposals is wanting to speed up the production of local plans, and so they've brought in, or they're bringing in, a new system. Obviously, we got our local plan adopted in 2024, so we were ahead of the game. We just want to make sure that people making planning applications to the council understand what it is we're seeking, and writing these supplementary planning documents was a way to do that. But under the new system, the types of document that we'll be producing will be changing. So that's why the government's put the cut-off in. That said, this SPD will sit there on our books and be able to be used in determining planning applications until we adopt a new local plan. That's something that's coming before Cabinet next month, but in essence we'd be looking to do a new plan by about 2030.
No, it's great that we're on the ball and ahead of the game on this, because it's so easy to get behind the curve on what developers are looking to try and get on. When they see an advantage, they take that advantage, and sometimes you have to preempt things. Stuart, you want to speak?
Yeah, would you say, based on the information, I mean, it's very pertinent, very relevant what you said, the change in the planning regulations from the June. Would you see that the government obviously have reviewed this, and a long-held belief of mine has been that it's too cumbersome, too bureaucratic, too difficult. Do you see that the government's new planning guidance coming from high, I was presuming that's a revision of the National Planning Policy Framework overall. Have you had a flavour of this yet? Have you seen what's due to come down the line? I mean, I appreciate we're getting off subject a little bit, but we have seen this several times before, and it would be interesting to hear Adam's views on this, if you're okay with that, Jim.
I think probably for all of us would be a little bit more interested to hear what's the changes, because this is obviously to preempt something else.
Because I think it's quite relevant.
Just if in the briefest possible way.
Yeah.
So, brief and planning policy. Yes, I mean, we've got the GNLP on the books, and these supplementary planning documents, as I said, will sit there, and they will help with the interpretation of the local plan and help us get planning applications of a good quality through, and so on. The new system that the government's bring in, as Councillor Clancy has said, is trying to strip out the bureaucracy as it's seen. So we will be producing much slimmer local plans. We'll be producing it over a 30-month period, which sounds long, but in planning policy terms is very quick. The government is wanting us to strip out a lot of the words and focus much more on just allocations and setting a maximum of 10 high-level objectives for local plans.
Yeah, supplementary to that. Realistically, do you think we'll get there this time?
I'm only a planner. I mean, it's going to be extraordinarily.
In mental respect, you've been doing this for a long time. I'm just asking you, will we get it? Because it has been the bane of everybody's life. The cumbersome, bureaucratic, difficult process. You and I have had this conversation for years, many times. And consecutive governments, consecutive secretaries of state have tried to streamline, have tried to make it less cumbersome, less bureaucratic. I'm just asking for a view. Do you think we'll get it?
It'll be challenging, yeah. The government's putting a lot of stock in digitalisation and stripping out a lot of the process. But they're still saying public consultation is at the key of the planning system, and we will still have to go through examination, and therefore we'll have to have evidence, and we'll have to defend the plan. And as you well know, it's an adversarial planning system, so you need to be robust when it comes to the examination.
Let's go to the vote. Oh,
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say I think it's a really good report, actually, and we all know that, well, green and blue spaces we refer to here are really beneficial for our mental and physical well-being. So I think it's really important to have this being built in the planning, really. So I welcome this document. That was all. Thank you.
thank you. Yeah, let's go to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations? And that's carried, Chair. Thank you. And you can't leave your seat too quickly, because we now then move on to the GNLP Policy 2 Sustainable Communities Supplementary Planning Document. And Adam again.
So very much similar overall picture here, bringing a document back for adoption by full council. The thrust of the document, as you'll be aware, is trying to assist development promoters in preparing high quality planning applications. The Appendix A to the report is the SPD itself, and within that, Table 2 is probably one of the key points where we're trying to point development promoters to key pieces of evidence and guidance that are out there to hit the 10 overall social and economic environmental issues that are in Policy 2 of the GNLP. So just trying to help developers navigate the planning application process. The SPD is focused upon helping developers prepare sustainability statements, which is part of the GNLP, but it also covers how they've approached master planning, seeking development delivery statements from them so we can be clear on how quickly they're going to build sites out, health impact assessments, which is looking about how healthcare and promotion of healthy lifestyles is factored into development. So again, just trying to increase the quality of the planning applications that we receive so that we can be confident that developments will build out as attractive places to live. The consultation for this ran between November and December, so at the same time as the previous SPD. We had a modest 18 representations. The point of the consultation is obviously to make sure the development industry is aware of this. We had a few points which have tightened up on some issues like land contamination, historic landscape, promoting good design, designing out the fear of crime into development, and also encouraging developers to aspire to higher standards of water efficiency. And like the previous report, we're keen to get this SPD on the books ahead of the changing requirements in June.
Thank you. I'm not going to presume that no one wants to say anything, but I'm guessing that people are probably as happy with this as they were with the previous one. This one's so much better than the previous one. Just to put that on record. I've read them in such detail. No, it's another piece of great work. So thank you. Let's move to the vote. All those in favour?
And that's carried, Chair.
Thank you, Adam, and thanks for the continued good work our planning department are doing on being ahead of the game on all these things. I know it must be a bit of a headache, so thank you. Let's move to the. I'll turn my page over. I've lost my place. The draft of the Broadland Health and Wellbeing Partnership Strategy. Nicola.
Good evening. Before you today is the draft health and wellbeing strategy for Broadland. The document reflects a refresh of the current strategy that's in place and will take us up to 2029. The strategy underpins the work we deliver with our partners to improve the health and wellbeing of our residents across the whole of Broadland and guides expenditure for the Health and Wellbeing Partnership on the projects and initiatives which it will deliver to improve health and wellbeing. The strategy refresh process was collaborative, and partners in the partnership their input formulated the refresh document. It was not a document that we wanted to produce on our own. It's a partnership, and so it's really important that the partners were involved through the development of the refresh document. As a consequence of the refresh, the priority areas of the strategy have slightly changed. There's been a refinement rather than a replacement of them. So, for example, rather than focusing on poor mental health, the focus is now on supporting good mental health. Action statements that sit below the priority areas have also been refreshed and refined in order to be more focused so that we can be really clear what the outcomes are that we're looking to achieve, so that we can monitor how effective the partnership is in delivering those outcomes. The strategy also closely aligns with the Broadland District Council strategic plan, particularly around empowering individuals and communities, but also supports the NHS new 10-year plan, the Norfolk Health and Wellbeing Joint Strategy, and the Norfolk and Waveney Health and Inequalities Framework. One of the things that sits below the strategy is the way that we actually work with our partners and the way that we deliver the health and wellbeing strategy. And what we've been doing over the last year is move into a more proactive approach where we look at the priorities, we look at our action statements, and we develop what we call expressions of interest, which are projects that we want to deliver an action statement on, and send that out to the partnership to ask them to submit proposals that they bring back to the partnership so that we are more collaborative in the way that we actually deliver those action statements and those outcomes. So really, if there's any questions, please do ask away about the strategy.
Yeah, thank you. Probably better qualified to answer this than myself, but I'm going to ask it. How are we cooperating across the county with, I mean, I appreciate it is working with the Health and Wellbeing Partnership by sheer nature of it. I mean, I think one of the things which is I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about is ultra-processed foods and the impact of ultra-processed foods, and what initiatives can we do to encourage people, frankly, to eat healthy, because there's a lot of science now beginning to show quite clearly that the benefits of a healthy diet, and you know the benefits, especially children, with a healthy diet, in terms of their mental health, in terms of sleeping, in terms of concentration, every conceivable reason. And the growing enemy is ultra processed foods. And I've sort of started to take a bit of interest in this, and I'm reading various pieces of papers on it. And I think it's really, really important, because I think it is proving that in society it's having a damaging effect in every respect: obesity, mental health, everything. Where does this fit in? How can this be woven into this strategy to help educate, inform, support, whatever?
It's not something that currently the partnership have been looking at, but it does fit really nicely into the work that the partnership have been doing to actually look at how we can promote healthy food. And so projects that are being looked at for funding are at the moment about focusing on how people can cook at home good quality food. Doesn't have to be expensive, and giving people the skills and the confidence to do that. But I will certainly take that point back about how we can make sure that we pick that up and consider what we can do in that space.
that's good to hear, very good to hear, because I think it's got to be a public initiative to actually help people cook, prepare food from scratch, because it is so much healthy. I mean, the growth in, frankly, laziness, in takeaway food, Deliveroo, Just Eat, people can't even be bothered to get off the sofa now to order their takeaway. They frankly will just go on the mobile phone, go onto the app, and the takeaway arrives. You know, all of these things contribute to societal damage, and I think, you know, there's a big issue here, big point here, that, you know, to try to educate people, to educate, to inform, and to work with, you know, health professionals, fitness professionals, dietitians, whoever, to try to also schools, to train within schools, to help people, like, you know, said, cook from scratch, prepare food, to eat healthy. There's always a claim it's more expensive. It's not more expensive. I mean, I'll give you an example. We've been preparing soup from scratch, big old slow cookers full of vegetable soup. That isn't expensive, but it's wholesome, it's good for you, and, you know, you put a bit of curry powder in it or something to make, if you want to make it a bit more interesting. But I think this is a big societal problem, huge, and, you know, it'd be good to see a specific initiative working cross-cutting through, again, Fran will know more about it than me, but through the Health and Wellbeing Partnership, to make a big effort in this area, because it's extremely damaging where we're heading.
I know on that theme, you've got the diet and nutrition projects, which get grants up to 5,000. That seems to be sort of that sort of thing that's something which to be developed and promoted more, because I'm a school teacher in our school. We have visitors from come in who prepare food with children, and they try things they've never tried before, and they have a hand in producing that food, and then they take it home and they nag their parents to go and buy some of the same ingredients they've used, because they've discovered that they really like carrots. They may not have even, you know, those sorts of things, or spring onions, or something as unusual as coriander in something which all the children were sniffing. And of course, coriander is one of those things a bit like Marmite, you know, that some people hate it, and some of the children were eating it raw by the handful, and you're like, right, okay, you obviously like that. And the parents like coriander, I've never bought that, but they're buying it now. So we know those sorts of things can have a positive effect. Anybody else? Sorry, before I talk too much. Eleanor.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I do agree with Councillor Clancy's observations about diet. What we do know, though, is unfortunately ultra-pure processed and fast food is actually highly addictive, and that's part of the problem. And ironically, as a planning authority, we seem to have very few options in terms of planning policy for us to be able to reject applications that consistently come forward for drive-through restaurants and fast food restaurants in our district. That's rather unfortunate. But my question is, in relation to this, actually, I was quite surprised to see the figures for obesity in the district. They are frighteningly high, with 64% of adults over the age of 18 being overweight or obese. And my question is, do we know what the level was of obesity 5 years ago and 10 years ago? In other words, can we see the rate of change?
I don't have that information available to me now, but I certainly make sure that we find it. I just want to follow up on the comment we've been having about ultra-processed food. What we'll do is we'll feed that back through our colleagues at Public Health and Norfolk County Council, so that we can make sure that they're aware of that, pick their brains around what works, and that can then be fed up through conversations across the county.
Sorry, I just had one other question in relation to also talking about changes in figures. Have we seen major changes in the figures for mental health, rates of mental health conditions as well? And can we say now at all that COVID has had a massive impact on the mental health of the population? Does that seem to be the case?
Again, I don't have those figures available to me now. I'll have to come back and find them. anecdotally, there's much more conversations about mental health, and there's certainly much more awareness of the need for good mental health and the need for support when mental health is not good. But I will get that data and share that with you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, food was actually brought up at the Health and Wellbeing Board last week by Councillor Carsock. Actually, she brought us up about, you know, the ultra-processed food, sugar, etc., all the things we know are not particularly good for us. But a lot of food, as you say, particularly as Councillor Laming says about, you know, about fast food is absolutely loaded with them, you know, fat, sugar, etc. So it is on everyone's radar. Public health will have all these figures. They'll have all of this to go through too. So that's not an issue there if you want that. What I was going to say as well, that mental health or mental well-being is absolutely something which has been championed by this council with Mindful Towns and Villages, and it's been really, really successful. I'm really pleased to say. We had a mental health summit last year, which was launched by Michael Gurney, Deputy Lieutenant, but also Mindful Norfolk, which actually I launched at the event, which was really good. But it was also been agreed last week at the Health and Wellbeing Board that there would be an annual summit, a mental health summit, which was really well attended by all of our partners, really well attended. And I know my conversations with the Norfolk and Suffolk Foundation Trust, which is the Mental Health Trust, they are looking at setting up neighbourhood teams as is working across health generally, but they are looking at setting up neighbourhood teams there. So we really are looking to address the difficulties around, you know, people's mental health, and as you say, try and get in early to promote mental well-being generally, because, you know, if we can get in early and support people early, and that's one thing I think we do fantastically well. I'm pointing at Mark through the Help Hub. You know, we get in early, we support people when there's issues around debt. Now, debt can generate significant mental stress. We all know that, you know. So low level, we can get in early and actually support people. So there's lots and lots of things that we already do as a council, and I absolutely welcome it. But the partnership, as I say, has done really well. I really hope that going forward, the only financial funding we've really had is from public health, which, you know, I'm privileged enough to be in a position that I managed to sign it off for this year and next year. So all of the partnerships have got, not insubstantial amount of money to start with, really, but it's just a small amount of money, and realistically we need to look at how we can shift money from the NHS basically as well, because there's been no real support from the NHS for the partnerships. I'll say this, you know, publicly, because it's true, and I've had these conversations with people within the NHS now, and I do think that is looking to shift. So I genuinely believe, and maybe I'm going a bit off, but it is very much part of the strategy that the health and wellbeing partnerships are a really good vehicle for addressing health inequalities. Very good vehicle, because we are ultra local. We know our communities. So for me, I really support this, and I always have done, and I believe there's lots of good work that goes on, has gone on, and will go on through the partnership, and particularly as we work closer and closer with our colleagues in health, which we haven't realistically too much in the past, I'll be frank, but I do believe there's a real opportunity now with the changes with the ICB. As of the 1st of April, we'll have a Norfolk and Suffolk ICB. If you look at the way Suffolk and North East Essex have worked over many years now, it's been much more collaborative, much more collegiate, and much more on an equal basis, which I think there's been a disparity really between the NHS, which is the big brother with loads and loads of money, and us down here as the poor partners. And I think there's going to be an equalisation of that. I really believe that. So I know I'm going to maybe a little bit off topic, Chairman, but I think it's really important that we recognise where we are, but where we could be, I think, going forward. Thank you.
Stuart.
I think it's laudable, everything we're doing, but I think, as Councillor Lamming alluded to, the proof of the pudding will be in the data. Where are we making progress or aren't we making progress? And I think this is the key to the data, the actual information. The initiatives are sound, they are very sound, but we must tinge that with the reality that the comparatives and the data, which Councillor Lamming has alluded to, are very important to look at that and to see what progress we're actually making. Because all the anecdotal evidence is people are leading less healthy lives, eating more fast food, and living behind screens. That's the anecdotal stuff. I've got no evidence to actually support that. But I think it's very important we have the evidence to actually look at that, because the flip side of the coin is there is evidence of obesity, there's evidence of increase in issues related to mental health, etc., etc. And I think, again, as already been said, post-COVID, COVID's got a lot to answer for, too, in every respect, socially, environmentally, economically, whatever. And I think we do need to try to evidence-base these initiatives. So let's try and have a look at where the success is and to be clear on where we're succeeding and where we're failing. And I think it's really important. The initiatives are sound, ever so sound, and ever so worthwhile. But we do need to evidence-base it, Jim.
Can I just ask, to what extent do we try and get into schools? Because I don't think your problem is primary schools. Your problem is secondary schools. I speak to my son and ask him about what he tries to eat that's healthy. There's nowhere to sit in his school at lunch, so he has to eat finger food. If he wants to, he takes a packed lunch, but if he has to buy something, what can he buy? He can only buy a slice of pizza because it's the only thing he can hold in his hand because there's nowhere to sit. So people walk around holding stuff that they can hold in their hands, which is generally unhealthy. Now, he's pretty healthy and he's a bit health obsessed anyway, which is positive. But then I speak to ex-pupils from my school where we give out, today I've got year twos wandering around eating just green beans. They love them. They're eating green, sweet pea type stuff. And they've got oranges and apples and they're eating all this fruit, which is fantastic. But I know that they get to year 7, and I'll see year 7 pupils, and they come and speak to us on the gate at the school, and they say, oh yeah, at my school, we get pizza, we can buy pizza. But they'll charge them, it's like a closed shop as well, £3 for a slice of pizza. £3 for a slice of pizza, how much money are they making? We sell our lunches at our school for £1.65, less than the recommended price, but it's a full lunch, nutritional lunch. But what we're doing is we're not schools, I'm getting a bit of a rant here, but I don't know what we can do about the fact that schools basically package up expensive, fatty, processed foods to eat quickly for the children because they get given limited time for breaks, they get nowhere to sit, and there's nothing, unfortunately, there's no impetus from government on this or Ofsted, because Ofsted come in and say, primary schools, what are you doing to keep your children healthy? And they say to high schools, we don't really care less. And because they're not interested in it. And so we bring up a generation of children to start having good habits and then say throw it away because you're in a fast food society where you've got to eat quickly because you've got a 20-minute break here and then you're back in a lesson, you've got another period and you can't sit down. And so I'm wondering, do we do anything about speaking to high schools in particular? Because I do think that primary schools do a good job of that.
Let me take that away because we know that the arrangement for schools is complex, with some still being run by Norfolk County Council academies. I'll take it offline and just see if there's a way that we can get in. Often getting into schools can be challenging, but it might be that Norfolk County Council through their public health team have gotten in, so we'll certainly explore that.
Thank you. So we'll hear what you say.
No, all I was endorsing what you were saying, really. I think we're losing sight of the reality, and for us to be successful and to actually make these initiatives work, we have to get into the areas where there are the problems. And again, I totally and completely endorse Nick's view about secondary schools, the emphasis on fast food, the emphasis on catch as catch can, eating on the move, all this kind of stuff, which is damaging. And I think for us to be seen to be effective, it'd be good to get into those areas and good to find out what's going on and to try to almost name and shame these organisations who frankly aren't trying. It could be offered in senior schools. It could change in senior schools. I'm involved with one particular senior school and I'm pushing accordingly for that very reason, because it's a big problem and I think we underestimate it at our peril.
Paul. Thanks, Chair. Going back to the strategy, the draft strategy. Sorry to bring it back. So this is a refresh of a previous strategy, and I noticed that you've got some, you've used updated data. So can you just give us an idea of what were the big changes? What did you notice then from last time to this time?
I would need to go back and read the existing strategy and just refresh myself on that. I think, as I talked about, the main changes that we've made are to reflect the fact that we need to be changing some of the messaging that we're making through our strategy. So like I said, the current strategy talks about what can we do around poor mental health, and as we've discussed, it's about promoting positive mental health, because we need to reset some of the conversations and reset, as Mindful Norfolk has done, it's about having conversations so that there's an environment where people can talk about mental health, but also giving people the skills to deal with maintaining mental health. So, because if you talk only about poor mental health, you're focusing at the point when something's gone wrong, and there's, rather than focus on giving people resilience and skills to maintain positive mental health, because life is a roller coaster and there are good times and bad times, and people need to be able to have the skills to manage their mental health through those life changes and life. So in terms of, I can't give you here now a summary of what's changed between the two documents, but I can certainly make sure that that is shared after this meeting. I should say apologies that Jake Kabula, who is the expert on the health and wellbeing strategy, having written both of them, is actually not very well today, which is why you've got me. I'm not able to give you all the specific details today.
Thank you. Just to carry on the what we'd like to see, I guess. We've talked about food. I would just like to make a comment, I guess, or an inquiry really about exercise, because that's also linked to mental health, good mental health, and obesity. And we've not talked about it. The access to organised exercise groups or training, gyms, and all those sort of things are really quite tricky in the area. They're quite expensive. It's generally an expensive hobby if you wanted to, exercise. So I would be very keen that this document, opens up opportunities and avenues to better exercise, or exercise groups, or just general fitness, in general, really. And is there anything, we can do along those lines?
It's certainly an area of focus for the current strategy, and that will continue in the new strategy. So there's particular works around movement and nutrition, which is focusing on that. We, as a council, not just related to the strategy, we're supporting the County Council Positive Intervention Service, which is about identifying people at risk of falls and then supporting them to address that. Part of that might be through referrals to Active Now, which is the service that we actually deliver around prescriptions for exercise. So it's something that we're really, really focused on, and as a partnership we're actually talking about projects that might address diabetes by linking people into nutrition but also exercise. So it's absolutely something that we're really keen on. Things like the nature prescription that we do in collaboration with the RSPB, it's about getting people out and about exercise through actually exploring nature. So it is really fundamental to the work streams that we're delivering, and we're always thinking about how we can promote exercise through the activities that we're delivering through the strategy.
Thank you, Chair. Just supplementary to the whole ultra-processed food thing, there was a programme on the TV recently called What Not to Eat, and they encouraged people to look on the back of labels to see what was there. And for example, a carton of ready-made egg custard actually doesn't contain egg. Yeah, it's quite amazing what you can find on the back of the label, and if you can't read it, then why are you eating it? But it would be worth maybe just sort of looking at how you could encourage people to look at the back of labels. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say that, and it is on the document here, I knew when Councillor Clancy was talking about it, basically about evaluation, I knew we built that into the strategy before. So all the pilots that were run, there was an evaluation that we set aside. I can't remember what it was, 5 or 10% of the budget to actually do evaluations, which I think is really valuable, because we need to know if things work or not. And you know, that was a big part of it. Obviously, we mentioned Frailty and Falls. That came from the partnership. We started doing this, and then it rolled on, and now it's rolled out across the country, the county. Maybe the country eventually, who knows, but certainly in the county. And you say about mental well-being, you know, that's something we've championed, and that's been rolled out further now. So I'm really pleased. But as I say, we need to evaluate what we do, but also we need to be realistic about what we can't do. And I bring back to food in schools, for instance. That's national. We really, I mean, we can talk to families, we can talk to children, but we can't really dictate the food that's given out in schools. That will come back, you know, we could go around every single school and talk to them. I don't really see that being beneficial, and certainly I don't think it'd be enough hours in the day for the people who run this partnership really to do that. But I'm just saying maybe that's something we could do on a political scale, you know, to lobby government really to actually do that. I don't see that within the remit of the partnership realistically. I just wanted to bring us back a little to reality of what we can and we can't achieve. But the partnership, I think, have done a lot of really good things. As I say, and a lot of things, as I said, have gone on to be county-wide and made a massive impact. And I took a massive impact, not just on individuals, but on budgets as well of our partners too. Because, you know, if someone doesn't fall, there's a big knock-on effect. You know, one, I'd say for them as an individual, but two, for the bigger system, you know, for them not turning up at not needing an ambulance, not going to A&E, not being admitted, not having a new hip put in, blah, blah, blah. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that you're talking tens of thousands of pounds, for the system. So there's lots of things that have been done within the partnership which have really made a massive difference to the bigger system, as I say. I just wanted to say that. Thank you. Hopefully that's helpful.
No, I think we all welcome what's been done. You know, there's a lot being done on, this is run on a tight budget as well, and we appreciate you. This is one of these things that you could just keep spending on, and every penny probably would make a difference in some way, but we haven't got that money. So it's great that all these organisations are working together, and I think everybody's very supportive of everything you're doing. So we don't want anything to come across as we're blaming you. I think perhaps with the final 2 years of this council, we're thinking perhaps people like me and perhaps Stuart and others are thinking perhaps we can change the world in the next 2 years, but it ain't going to happen, is it? Stuart, go on, one final comment.
All I was going to say, I endorse everything what everybody said, but I think, again, without it's the problems have been not in the last 1 year, 2 years. The last problems have got worse over the last 10 years. So let's not bring any politics into it because it's not political. But I'll just quote you a little statistic. Again, Councillor Laming mentioned planning. Between St Augustine's and the boundary, there's 27 takeaway food outlets, fast food outlets, 27. Now that illustrates where the problems are. And I think we need to take a really hard look at this. And I think lobbying government to change the rules, you mentioned schools, we've gone backwards. Schools used to actually be compelled to actually serve healthy food in the canteens and in packed lunches and options in senior schools. Obviously, by what you say, they're not now. We've gone backwards. We've definitely gone backwards. And those options are too easy on this fast, ultra-processed foods and these unhealthy diets. I mean, I just said to Paul, you buy a loaf of white bread from the supermarket, look what it contains. It's dreadful because all those preservatives, I think, as you rightly say, we can't change the world, but again, a little bit of lobbying, if we could agree to do a bit of lobbying of MPs cross-party on this, you know, maybe if you could take that message to Cabinet, that would be good. That isn't going to change anything, I do agree, but I think it's responsible for us to try to make something of this report which is absolutely meaningful.
Let's go to the recommendation. All those in support of the recommendation stated. And that's carried. Thank you for all the work and indulging us this evening. Thank you. And finally, we come to facilitating adult social care transformation, implementing local area coordination with Mark.
So, in a nutshell, if I can, local area coordination is the new coming thing in adult social care. Councillor Mark will already know about this, so local area coordination is a way of putting, in the same way that we might put a social prescriber or an early help person in front of a GP to divert things away from clinicians or other professionals that could be best dealt with elsewhere. The idea of local area coordination is that you do that with social workers. So you have people embedded in local communities, employed, in actual fact, initially by Broadland District, but backed by adult social care. And these people there are to engage with local communities and find alternatives to needs that would otherwise be dealt with by the purchase of a package of care. Because social workers are very good at purchasing packages of care, but it's not really their remit to have that wider community knowledge and know what else could be done instead. So why do we want to be involved as a district in something which is a county initiative, an adult social care initiative? And the answer is that county approached Broadland District to be the first to roll out this local area coordinating programme. The reason being is that they recognise that the existing infrastructure that exists in Broadland, in terms of some very well developed community networks, the infrastructure that we have sitting around the help hub and whatever, is a really good way to get the local area coordinators on the ground running, rather than try and develop a whole new infrastructure at county to make that work. So these two posts that we're looking at here are an initial pilot. It's 2 posts funded by county, employed by the district. The aim is that Broadland will be the first district to go fully live with the local area coordinators, and that would look like 6 across the entire district by the end of October. I have to be honest and say I think that's likely to be February the following year, but the aim at the moment is October, so that's 6. And then the entire programme will be rolled out across the county over the course of the forthcoming year. The idea being that there will be 3 local area coordinators provided per 55,000 population. So if you look at primary care networks, you know, the GP conglomerates that run primary care, broadly they're about 55,000, 57,000.
And the idea is to have 3 local area coordinators per primary care network across Norfolk County. It really is an advantage to residents. It fills a gap at the moment between social prescribers who are essentially short-termists. They will look at a problem, they'll find the solution, they'll link people into various community networks and whatever. Admittedly, they'll see the same person again 3 or 4 months later if it's another set of problems. But they are short-termists. These guys are long-termists. They're the wraparound people who are going to be looking at individuals and families and doing work with them in the medium and the long term. The sort of work that might be looking at what that family eats and the effect on health, that might be looking at the barriers to employment rather than just looking at what benefits you can claim. So it's a much longer term intervention. We also think that it will enhance community cohesion for a start off. That's one of the reasons that we've looked at Aylsham and Thorpe St Andrew to start off with, because there are existing infrastructures there that these guys can just go and sit in. They can just piggyback on those existing community facilities that are there and meet the local populace pointed at by local community workers. I think it's really exciting. I think it will be a real enhancement to service. Again, it's a different way of doing things. And as we go forward, it's exciting to be, as a district, involved in the co-production of a new type of service rather than a passive recipient of a new type of service when it comes on. And this, I think, is the sort of development that's really going to inform what integrated neighbourhood teams look like as we go forward in our unitary councils and we go forward implementing the current NHS plan. I think that I won't be here because I'll be retired, but I can really see what that starts to look like and why we as a district are really well advised to be in on the ground with this in county.
Thank you, Paul. I think you waved just first.
I won the prize. Thank you. I think this is really good. Good to see that we're being proactive and getting help directly out in the community. But it's a trial. How are we going to measure the degree of success? Because hopefully it is going to be successful and we'll get lots more of these people out there. And who is going to do the measuring?
There are 2 types of measure that we can look at the moment. I think in the first instance, for the pilot, it will be a qualitative measure. It will be case study based. Who did what to whom and what were the results? As it moves forward and rolls out across the county, I think it will be a quantitative measure, because at the moment, what happens, there's something called SKI, and I cannot for the life of me remember what the acronym stands for, but it's essentially the adult social care front door. So if you call adult social services, that is where you will end up, in that department with the call handlers and the advising social workers in there. What we should see in the end is we should see less people going on to social workers and more people diverted out to the local area coordinators, because the local area coordinators will take referrals directly from that front door. And then it's a question, isn't it, of following that through. So rather than an expensive but perhaps not wholly necessary package of care, what happens instead on a community basis?
Thank you. I too like to wholly endorse this. Again, declaring a slight interest, I have been quite involved, probably not quite as much as Fran, but I of recent times been quite involved with this, with the county, with Ian Wake, who's delivering the major transformation project on adult social care at Norfolk County Council. And the initial signs, the initial vital signs, the initial KPIs are looking very, very good. It's not, again, about a one size fits all. It's not about a traditional model. It's a changing model, what you've alluded to. And I think potentially it has great potential to actually deliver a better quality service and actually save money. This has also encouragingly got cross-party support of the county. It is good buy-in from all political parties, because the new director and the ADs, the assistant directors, are obviously working with the districts to actually deliver something really worthwhile on the ground. It's cutting out that, in reducing that level of uncertainty, it's reducing that level of bureaucratic process, but it's focused on, again, something which people like me have been, ever since I've been a councillor, and again, I think a lot of people in this room would agree, it's based around the frontline service delivery, actually delivering to the client, the end recipient of the service, and making it easy access, making it, yes, okay, there's a degree of signposting, but there's a degree of assessing the need and delivering on the need. And I actually think this is, you know, okay, the term is transformational, but it is actually transformational. And as I say, I've been really encouraged to see where this is going. As I say, again, this is not a political thing. This is actually improving, not accepting the status quo, because the status quo is not, it can't continue in its present basis in terms of finance, in terms of resourcing, in terms, it's looking at doing it differently, but it's looking at doing it better. And the good thing is there's a great deal of buy-in from this, Chairman, which I think is very encouraging.
I'll go to your colleague.
Thank you. Thank you. I just really want to build on it, because the new service is about long-term relationships, and we know that the longer you have a relationship with someone, the more open they'll be and the more they will share the issues that are affecting them. And by those long-term relationships, we will get better improvements in health and well-being, because we'll have a better understanding of what the barriers are, what the issues are that they're dealing with, and they will trust those workers to help them address those things. I just wanted to add that, because it's a really fundamental part of the model.
Thank you. Eleanor.
Yes, thank you. You said that I think it's Thorpe St Andrew and Aylsham have been chosen because the existing infrastructure is particularly amenable to this. But could you explain exactly what that means? I live in Thorpe St Andrew, so I am interested in what that existing infrastructure actually is.
Yeah, so it's Thorpe St Andrew and surrounding environs, so it's Thorpe St Andrew and Sprowston actually. And the general thinking is that in terms of community networks that exist, in terms of drop-in centres, social clubs that people go to, the support of Thorpe St Andrew Town Council, and their enthusiasm for it, that informs the Thorpe St Andrew aspect. Aylsham, I was actually in Aylsham this morning talking to the Aylsham Community Trust, and that is a very, very 40-year, well-developed service that encompasses everything in the community. And I was mindful of when you were talking about going into high schools earlier on around food. Well, the high school that Aylsham Community Trust is a part of it. And following my talk to them this morning, I'm getting emails from them saying, can we come and talk about something else, because they want to link into the new local area coordinators as well as our social prescribing service. So that's the reason that they were alighted on. I have to say that they were alighted on in the space of about 2 meetings with some people talking, and there wasn't a deep dive analysis done on it. But if we wanted to be successful for the first 2 people on a pilot, which is going to be probably about 3 to 4 months worth before the rest comes on, the thinking was that we would have a better chance in those localities.
Yes, thank you. So in practice, we've already got social prescribers working, and you said they're the short-termists. So there's presumably going to be a good linking relationship between these LACs and the social prescribers. sometimes the things that concern me is adding an additional structure within an already very, very complex system just leads generally to people being in more meetings, discussing what the problems are, and still not really making a huge difference on the ground. I mean, there'll be some people who I'm sure will be helped, but the sheer volume of need is enormous, and I sometimes wonder still about the structures that we have, and they're complicated. People spend a lot of time in meetings discussing things and not so much time on the ground.
Yeah, just to come back on that, the people that are spending the time in meetings are boring people like me, and we're doing that at the moment. So in terms of flattening that hierarchy, these guys, when they're employed initially by Broadland District Council, will be line managed by the team managers for the social prescribers. So they will all become one service with two different functions within that service. And the local area coordinators, I think that their two primary sources of referral are going to be SCI, the front door from adult social care, as we already discussed, and the social prescribers who are already embedded in the surgeries, who are then going to be able to identify the individuals and families that will benefit from the long-term work. And sometimes the social prescribers are attempting to do that within their existing framework, but it'd be much, much more successful if we had a dedicated team to do it.
Thank you. Just one more question. So how is this being received by GPs and the health service generally?
At the moment, to the best of my knowledge, GPs don't know much about it. GPs know an awful lot about social prescribing, but from a local area coordinator point of view, Councillor Weimar, I haven't heard much from the ICB and from the primary care element of the ICB on it.
No, I think from primary care, you're right. But from the wider ICB, they're very much buying into this transformation with adult social care. It's, if I explain for some people, in this transformation, the executive director of adult social care has done this in Thurrock previously. There he did take, I can't remember if it was 5 or 7 years. Basically, he's looking to do it in 2 here. Basically because of financial constraints. But the essence of this, and this is a part of that transformation, which is very much person-centred. So it's relationship-based, really, which we haven't always done. We haven't always took the time to build relationships with people. These people are going to be able to build relationships with individuals and families, which is massive. And if you read any research, as I have done in the past, for social work research, but I'm sure elsewhere, the best outcomes are to do with relationships. They're not actually to do with having a PhD after your name or whatever. That's not actually important to people when they sit down and talk to you. So if you can get people who can relate to people, they can have that conversation, honest conversations about what they actually do need and how they can be helped within the community, as you say. That's by far better. You know, they don't want to be shipped off to somewhere else. If like, say, within Aylsham or Thorpe St Andrew, the facilities are there for them. And there's lots and lots of groups in these areas. I know some of them, and you say the ACT, as you say, in Aylsham, the community trust there are fantastic, and some of the things they do. And they actually get food, actually on a food, I went there, I visited there, and they actually get food delivered to them every day from Waitrose. And they produce fresh food from there. I don't know if you ate when you were there, but they produce really good food, actually. Oh, well, there you go. Had you stayed for lunch, you'd have probably got some very nice carrot and coriander soup or something. But no, but this is a really important part of it. And what I would say is that Broadland have been chosen for this because of how impressed they were with the Help Hub. You know, when Ian Wake, his name is the director, when Ian came and looked at the Help Hub here, he was absolutely wowed by it. He thought it was way beyond anything he'd seen anywhere else. and the way it functioned and the way it supported our communities. And this is an extension of that. And this is very much, saying we know that you know your communities and you can work well with your communities. So that's why we want to embed this in it. So this is very much a commendation for the Help Hub and Broadland District Council in general. Thank you.
I've got three people waiting to speak. I've got Shane, then Stuart, then Lacey. I'll just say that what you're describing in a way, it sounds a lot how a lot of schools employ family support workers. And those family support workers do that. They build a relationship with those parents. Those parents may feel they're going through an absolute crisis, but actually sometimes they just need someone to speak to. And sometimes it's just easing them through those moments and just pointing them exactly in the direction the person they need to go to, rather than it becoming a much more senior, a much more, dare I say, a more highly paid person who's using a lot of someone's time who actually wasn't the person they really need. It's just they needed somebody they know who they can trust to actually open up with. So it sounds very similar to what a lot of schools are doing around that. We'll go, Shane.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small point, looking at it from a holistic level. Will the LAC or the social worker also have access to occupational therapists? Because sometimes it's just a case of a minor adaptation might be all a person needs to live independently.
The answer to that is yes, because the OTs are embedded within the community health teams, to which both the local area coordinators and the social prescribers now routinely have access. So that referral tends to go through a route called integrated care coordinators. And those are the guys that are employed by adult social care, but they've got a foot in both camps, foot in primary care, foot in adult social care, and they can do the cross referrals through there. So the answer is yeah. It could be a handy person plus a lot of them might just be a couple of grab rails.
Yeah, I'd just like to endorse what Fran has been saying about this, because it is, if it can come off and work, it is a step change in improvement. It's going to do, again, Eleanor's alluded to it, it's going to actually cut out the back office and it's going to focus on the front line. And these local area coordinators have got to be extremely skilled, good people, because they will be the route to the support, in other words, to the occupational therapist, to the social prescriber. And those people will have to know and understand how to make that work. And there'll be a lot of inbuilt accountability. Those people have got to be very, very good at their job, because this is really a step change in adult social care. This will actually be, instead of hanging on the phone, again, I know I've been there recently for 71 minutes and nobody answers the phone, you'll be able to get the local area coordinator on the phone, via an email, or by a text or whatever, and he or she will be there on the front line to help you. And this is what this transformation project is about. This is really different for Norfolk. It really is hopefully going to make a difference. And again, as Fran has alluded to, Ian Wake did it in Croydon, and I've got to know him quite well over the last few months, and I would have every confidence that he gets it. He gets it in a sense that he doesn't want, metaphorically speaking, County Hall full of administrators, with all due respect to Matt, and I genuinely mean this. Obviously, you're trying to deliver this here and get this off the ground. Of course, there's a need for managers. Of course, there's a need for administrators. But this is all about service provision at the front line. And these local area coordinators, he or she, are going to be very accountable, and they're going to need to be very good, because this is a frontline job, and there'll be no hiding behind a useless County Hall telecom system and people who don't answer emails. These were people who will be very accountable, who will be able to cross-reference to other professionals, who will in many ways be accountable to the local area coordinator. This is going to bring in much more accountability. It's going to streamline services with a view to delivering a much better outcome for the recipient of those services. And I actually really believe this can work.
Is
there any anecdotal evidence from the other areas around the country of reductions in demand at the social care level into the community?
Yes, there are. So, although this approach or philosophy is new to Norfolk, it's not new nationally. And there are 11 councils, I think, at the moment that are implementing this. And the stuff, the data and the qualitative information which is coming out of there is what's informing the development in Norfolk. So it's not being done in vitro. It's part of a much wider sort of national movement.
Yes, thank you. It sounds a really good initiative. I'm always a little bit, I wonder sometimes about these front-facing roles that involve people developing a good relationship with a family that, or an individual that might be struggling. One of the problems that can arise is this churn of staff. So you get people moving on. So a family who's really struggling can get a good relationship with somebody, and then they move on, and it's absolutely devastating. And I don't know if there's any way, I mean, obviously the person who comes into the role after that can sometimes obviously be extremely good as well, but it's still, because so many of these roles are involved with developing that close relationship, and the person who's working with the family gets to know them extremely well, and the background and the history extremely well, and then, as I said, they move on. So I don't know if there's any way, there probably isn't, but any way of really emphasising that trying to keep people in roles is incredibly important here. Because if you think, but it's a long time ago in the past, but some people actually had a relationship with it wasn't uncommon for people to have a relationship with a family GP or a social worker who was, of course, in their community, and it was worth its weight in gold, because that 5-minute consultation that they might have was extremely valuable, because when that family or that individual went in, they were known. They weren't having to repeat all those details again and again and again to somebody new. So that's the worry I have with the complexity of everything now, and people moving on, you know.
I think that the answer is as you've correctly stated, is in retaining the right people, isn't it? It's in recruiting the right people and in retaining the right people. So we've got to get the right people in the first place, and then we've got to hang on to them. What encourages me, and it might encourage you, is since we developed social prescribing in the Broadland district, which was 2021, yeah, about 5 years ago. Was it? Was it? Well, we had a lot in South Norfolk. Social prescribing? Did it? Oh, right, okay. Okay. But since the current system that we've run, so Broadland has, God, I'll tell you in a minute. So they've got the equivalent of about 11.6, social prescribers employed by Broadland District Council. And since we started that service, we have lost one, and he had to retire due to ill health. So we are retaining them, and I'm rather hopeful that we will retain these people as well. We've also got relatively good terms and conditions as well, particularly in terms of salary. So we're paying the equivalent of AP, assistant practitioner salary, to retain these people. So I'm very hopeful.
That's very positive. It remind me of the situation, you know, when you've got a really good community policeman, because you only see him for 6 months and he's gone because he gets promoted or she gets promoted. And you go, oh, they were so good, because the really good ones get taken and promoted and they're gone, and that's it. And you're like, oh, you know, yeah, just when they've built the relationships, just when they've got to know all the children, just when they've got to know all the local troublemakers who actually speak to them in the street. So yeah, and if that, we want to keep that that level of retention from social prescribing sounds really positive. I think we're all thinking this is great. We know that social care is broken, really. So anything which attempts to alleviate the burden on the system as it is and tries to redefine how we do things in a better way and, as it were, a more friendly way that is less about phoning up a call centre and sitting on the phone for 71 minutes and then speaking to somebody who hasn't got a clue who you are and having the call diverted possibly through to somewhere else because the call centre is busy and you end up speaking to somebody even possibly in a different part of the country. This is just brilliant. So that's my view, but I think everyone else is nodding. So let's go to the recommendations stated there. All those in support of the recommendations?
And that's carried unanimously.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's really exciting, I think, to hear that at the end. And a positive. You know, it could be a social care thing that's like, oh, God, but actually, well done. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Close the meeting at 8:05 p.m.